I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. First item on the agenda will be consider approval of the consent agenda items, approved minutes from February 22nd, and statement of bill paid in the amount of $168,967.69.
Mr. Mayor, I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda items.
Go ahead. Okay, there's been a second, and a motion and a second. Would the clerk please call roll?
Adams?
Yes.
Cahar?
Yes.
Malott?
Yes.
Shriver?
Yes.
Stites?
yes,
The next item on the agenda will be requests for comments from the public. Jack, do you have any?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I do have some public comments. Again, we solicited public comments online for the folks who were able to participate, so I did have two received that way. The first is from Dan Saran at 805 South 110th Street. I understand the desire to have a new fire station, police station, and city hall facility. However, the city cannot afford to maintain streets currently. We cannot afford to reopen the North End Fire Station with even the extra ambulance that we own free and clear. Know that most citizens want public safety first and not a new city hall. Furthermore, the street department has turned the North End Fire Station into an eyesore at the gateway to our neighborhood. Take the equipment back down to the river lock. We do not want it up here at the neighborhood entrance. We want our fire station open back up on this side of the UP tracks. Stop dreaming of spending our tax dollars on one project instead of public safety first project. We are a small town of 4,500 and we need to act like a town of that size. The other comment came from Ms. Lois Roberts, who owns property along K32. She didn't have a verbatim written comments, but the nature of her comments would be against construction of public housing as part of the Towne Center project, as well as the construction of a new city hall until what she described as the right kind of development were to occur, and she specifically mentioned a restaurant. Those are the only two public comments that were solicited to my office.
Thank you. Okay, the next item on the agenda will be a presentation from Alco Development on the Towne Center project and consideration of any necessary action.
Mayor, with us tonight, we have Dustin Baker, which you have heard from before, who would like to make a presentation about the Towne Center project, private development. We also have Greg Kendall with Wine.edc that's here that may wish to speak to this, and Scott Anderson's here as he's been engaged in some of these processes as their question. So with that, I will turn it over to Dustin and let him do his presentation.
Okay, thank you, Mike. And thank you, Mayor, City Council, for allowing me to speak tonight about the Towne Center project. If you recall back, I think roughly sometime in December 2020, I was before you and I requested that we engage together as a partnership with helping splitting the cost with the city 50-50 on a market study for a mixed-use development called the Towne Center project. Mixed use being retail, commercial on the base level and apartments on the top level. So we agreed that night to go ahead and initiate the study. The study was completed by Novograd Consulting. They're a national firm that provided certified public accounting valuations. They handle market studies all across the country. I've used them before. They're nationally recognized. So I called them up and requested the study to be done. Basically, the scope of the study was to look at the four 3-story buildings, approximately 27,000 square feet per building. And that would comprise of 80 housing units. Now, whenever I requested the study to be done, that's pretty much all I told them. I had a preliminary site plan that we've all seen. I showed that to them and I said, this is kind of the scope of the project. Do your market analysis and come back with a proposal on, number one, with this project be a viable project, and number two, how many units should I put there? 80 units being kind of the gist of what I told them that we were exploring, and then what the market rate rent would be, the proposed market rate rent, along with what amenities should we provide. Unit amenities within the apartments and the common area amenities themselves. So they looked at Novogradac, looked at the primary market area when they went and did their analysis, and they looked at Western Wyandotte County, including Edwardsville, Bonner Springs, Shawnee, and Lake Rivera. They also, because in that primary market area, they were unable to capture enough data and enough comparable properties, so they actually stretched it into part of Lenexa as well. So their findings in the primary market area for demographics were there was an average growth rate as far as the population is concerned. I think it was 0.8% on an annual basis. There was average, above average household income. For supply, there was a lack of, like I mentioned before, there was a lack of comparable properties in the primary market area. And when they included Lenexa, there was a slight oversupply. I think they roughly calculated about 205 units of oversupply in the primary market area when they included Lenexa. In general, when they looked at what the rents, the vacancy and absorption rate would be for the Towne Center project, they came up with average rents of between $900 and $1,250 a month for the units. Once the property was stabilized, they estimated we have about 5.5% vacancy. And to get to stabilization, if you built the units that they were looking at, we probably would see somewhere in between 18 and 22 units per month being rented until we reach stability. So this is the housing study in a nutshell. The top 3 line items in the report in this slide show 1 and 2 and 3 bedroom units in the primary market area from a median and average standpoint on square footage and rent. And then what the Towne Center proposed rents based on the market study demographics would be. So as you can see, 1 bedroom units in the primary market area were roughly 778 square feet. Average or median rents were 1,046 compared to the proposed market rate rents. This is, and again, I'll reiterate, this is not, we looked at this being a market rate project, not a subsidized project. But the market rate rents for the Towne Center proposal would be for a 1 bedroom, 750 square feet. They proposed $900 a square foot, or $900 a month. For a 2 bedroom, 1,100 square feet, $1,045 per month, and then for a 3-bedroom, $1,250 and $1,250 per month in rent. Now, I'll specify that this is their starting proposal, what they would recommend. Of course, barring the demand, if the demand is higher, and we can push the rents, we will, but, we'll just have to see where we go. Some other housing study considerations, like I mentioned, they specified what the unit amenities should look like. They mentioned having washer and dryers in each of the unit, having hard surface countertops, tile bathrooms, smart locks and smart lighting, and just some of the unit amenities, some of the common area amenities on site. We would propose having Amazon lockers on the first floor for the tenants. And of course, the retail component of this mixed-use development will allow itself in general to be a common area amenity for the apartments. We would look at something like a restaurant, a coffee shop, a UPS store. Some of those types of tenants would go serve the apartment unit tenants very well. Offsite, they talked about, and I also told them about the green space, the trails that Mike has mentioned. That is a very big offsite common area amenity for this development. And we couldn't stress that enough in the report and on behalf of Alco. Parking would be your typical off-street parking lot provided, and security, having security cameras and some of those features. That's really it about the overall market study itself. I'd like to open it up to questions before I go on with my presentation.
Are there any questions?
I was wondering how many parking spaces per unit were included per housing unit?
How many parking spaces?
Yes, per housing unit.
Typically, you'll see on average 1.5 parking spots per bedroom.
The site, I remember we looked at the site plan early on, and the parking better exceeded our multifamily housing standard. So there's actually, I think in the concept plan, there's actually over parking in the sense that you have both commercial uses and the housing uses. So it better exceeded our parking. I'd have to look at the total numbers from the concept plan that was presented. Yeah.
Where are we at on the, I know that we had asked for a full housing study, and it sounds like it was just done for down there. Where are we at on that?
Yeah, I've received the housing study back. It's at my office. I'm reviewing it right now, and I should have it tonight for his review in probably the next week or so.
I just wanted to clarify on that as well. The 1.5 parking spots per bedroom, would those be separate from the retail parking spots?
Yes, they will be.
Thank you.
If there are no further questions, definitely go ahead.
Okay.
Wait a minute.
I am always absolutely have been in favor of the project from the get-go. I think it's probably some of it probably harmed.
We can't hear it all. We can't hear what he's saying at all.
Is his mic on?
It should, yeah, just speak directly into it.
Probably the mask.
Well, I could be, but I'm aware. The question that I had was, I am in favor of this project, and I have been for a long time because of the condition of this building. But I was wondering what kind of a success have you had for a lure for retail businesses in these buildings. I think we could put people in the apartments. I was curious about the lure for putting in like your fucking UPS and coffee shop and that sort of thing. Is that something that's speculative, or would that pretty positive that that would be here?
I think we have a strong chance, or I wouldn't be up here, proposing it. But I will say that it is tough for me to go give you a definite answer on that until we kind of move a little bit further down the path. Whenever the plan would be to engage a property management company. There has been several that I've talked to that, you know, the reason I mentioned the coffee shop and the restaurant and the UPS store is I think there's some demand for that type of space in this complex based on my conversation with a commercial property management firm.
I agree with you. I think there is a bit of demand for that down there because we won't have anything down there. You know, if you want to get coffee, you gotta go to Barnes or you gotta go to gas station. I agree with you. That's why I'm really in favor of this project. Thank you for that.
I hate to keep saying we can't hear, but we can't hear you.
Well, I'm about to swallow this microphone. I just stated that I do think that there's a need for the retail down there. I don't think going to the apartments would be the kind of problem per se. But as far as the retail, I was hoping that there'd be a good lure for that and that it would be successful. So, and then I am in favor of this project. Hope you heard that.
Okay.
Go ahead.
I have a question. It's actually of Mike. Since we don't allow alcohol in the buildings and firearms, that type of thing, that will not impact the project because of our ordinances with city property.
I believe so. It would be that those would be from private spaces. So just as we have two tenants down here now, I don't believe that those regulations would impact the private businesses. A city occupied space, then those rules could apply, but not to private business, to the homes, to those types of things. That's the chief as it is, but that's my understanding.
Okay, thank you.
Other no other list, proceed.
Okay, so the next point I'd like to present is the investment figure that both myself as the developer and the city would be looking at. I can, as the developer, you know, I'll give you a rough ballpark estimate of the 4 buildings, you know, we would be looking at, and this is an approximate estimate, but $2.25 million per building, so a $9 million total investment in the project from Alco Development. We'd be looking at annual rents on the project of $700,000 plus or minus a year. And for the retail and office space, we just kind of ballpark an estimate of annual sales of $1 million to $2 million a year. From the city standpoint, you know, we would be looking at requesting the site to be prepared, the utilities to be upgraded and relocated as needed for engineer plans, and some stormwater improvements for engineer plans. So moving forward, what I would like to request from the council, at least for you to consider, is moving forward with the site plan consensus that we've laid out on a phased approach. So that would be the first 2 buildings being built. To do that, after we enter into the site plan consensus, I would request tonight to consider entering into the partnership agreement for the private development. Scott Anderson has prepared the draft. that agreement. Then I'd also like you to consider releasing the funds for the engineering work. Bartlett and West has a proposal for $175,000. That gets all the engineering work done to basically 95% construction documents to allow, that would allow me to go and receive bids and quote the work. And then I would be able to come back to the council and go, okay, for your portion of this project, based on getting 3 bids, it's going to be X number of dollars. And then at that time, I would ask you to either give us a go or a no. So if we go, then we start the work. So that's.
This is the engineering, the 175 for the engineering, is that site engineering or what all is in that scope?
That on top of the site engineering and the construction documents, that's also, preparing the NOI and the SWAP report. That's really for the entire site for phase 1, and then also for the stormwater for the entire site.
I would note, as you recall, we issued bonds in 2019 for fundamentally this work, where we've been going as far as the demo of the buildings and then start site prep and things. We kind of moved around some, the site planning process, but we have, I think, about $306,000 in the project fund for specifically engineering work. So from a funding standpoint, the funds are available and dedicated specifically for this Towne Center project. The water lines, sewer, utilities, site layouts, all those kinds of things.
Would any of the site prep work be done before the go, no-go decision or just the engineering?
No, it would strictly be the engineering and the drawings. In fact, at Bartlett and West, in their proposal, they outline receiving 50% complete construction documents at a certain point in time, and then 75% complete documents, and then 95%. My plan actually would be to try to go and receive some sort of preliminary estimate based on 50% complete docs and 75% complete docs. So we kind of know before we actually go out to hard bid it, we kind of know where we sit. And in the meantime, I will be coming back and communicating with council on any updates that I receive. Plus, I will be trying to work with I will be working with an architect team if we enter into the development partnership agreement. I'll engage the architect team and be able to come back to you while the engineering drawings are being done, come back to you and we can work as a team to figure out what exactly the Towne Center project will look like. I have some ideas, but I feel like it's a partnership. I want your input.
And who would be paying for the engineering proposal?
I would be requesting the city be paying for the engineering work to be done, because ultimately what I would be requesting, what the partnership agreement spells out is the city will own all of the infrastructure, they will own all of the land, and I, as a developer, will enter into a long-term land lease with you. So really, ultimately, the city will own the documents. That's why I'm requesting that you pay for the engineering.
And would the developer or you guys have any costs out before the go, no-go decision, or is the risk all on the city?
I will be paying for the architect. to handle the renderings and paying for the engineer to begin starting my site plan. Because my site plan will involve just the buildings themselves, but I have to be in tandem with you as we're getting the engineering work done. What I don't want to do is just wait on that. I'll be engaged in the engineering and the architect work for my part of the puzzle as well.
Thank you.
I did have a question. This is Margaret. So what is involved for the city to do the prep work?
Well, I'll try to answer. So, I mean, the
Cost-wise.
engineer, I'm sorry.
Cost-wise?
Well, I mean, the engineering cost is proposed at $175,000. And I don't know if you heard earlier, we have about $306,000 set aside for the project. We won't know the exact cost of site work until we kind of have the engineering. That's the point where Dustin was saying he hopes to, when we're at about 50% engineering, go out and get some estimates at that point. And so if we see that, the costs are coming in way above what might be normal or expected, then we could come back. So we're looking at the project being in 2 phases, but the engineering has to be done, for everything. For example, the sewer line that's here now that quite honestly has problems as it is, has to get moved out of the way no matter what, with the electric lines. And that's really what the engineering will help tell us what those costs are, where those utilities are going to be relocated. Kind of almost an assumption that you have some future blank kind of lot, and no matter what you put on it, you have to be able to provide the utilities to. So that's really what the engineering is all about. So we don't really have a cost to say it's going to cost this much to build this piece. That's really where the engineering comes in. Not any different than when we do a road project or something like that, where we utilize the engineers to start building the estimate. It's a little easier on a road because you could say I'm going to build 2 lanes with curb and gutter and throw a big number at it. This is a little more delicate, I guess. So typically on project sites, we would engage an engineer to help you determine what those costs are. Dustin probably speak to that more because he does development projects, I guess all the time, every day. That's what he does. So he can speak to that more.
No, I think Mike is spot on. I mean, what I don't want to do is throw out a number to you right now without getting the engineering work at least at 50% state, because I would just be giving you a ballpark number right now. But I would much rather get to a point. You'll still own the plans. That's the essence of, if we don't move forward with the project, you will still have the plans in your possession, so you can utilize them however you wish.
With the development agreement that is being proposed, drafted by Scott, what is our obligation? Is there any obligation that we would be committed to on that development project beyond the 175 at this point?
I'll let Scott answer those.
Council member, I have drafted an agreement for this project based off of the information I had so far. In this agreement, it's basically 3 steps. Step number 1 is the city and the developer agrees on a site plan. Once all the parties are in agreement, then we agree on a schedule. We say, here's what you know what we're going to do, here's when we're going to do it. We do need to add that 3rd step. Once we have the cost estimates back, there needs to be the ability of the city to cut it off if the costs are not acceptable. That is not in the agreement right now, that needs to be added. I've already made a note of that as we were, I thought we were a little further along in the costs and apparently I wasn't. So that needs to be incorporated. So that's the 3 steps I would propose. Come up with a site plan, agree on the schedule, and then you receive cost estimates. If you like those cost estimates, then you make a go, no-go decision. Probably with a not to exceed number. We all know things change, the cost estimates come back. And it may even be two-pronged. One is you want to know exactly what you're committing to for the initial engineering costs. You also want to know when those come back, the agreement does say the city will prepare the site. So we would also want a separate no-go decision on that too. So you would want to include the engineering costs and the total site plan.
To my understanding, there'd be 3 possible exits for either party.
Yes.
At the end of the site plan, if it was not agreeable with either party to move forward, the schedule, if once we got some of the estimates in and the scheduling, we could put either one could exit at that point in time.
Yes.
And then the last one would be if the costs were not within what we agreed to or was estimated to be appropriate for the project, either of us could exit at that point.
That's correct. And that third one is the one that needs to be incorporated. I don't, it was this draft for you. Yeah. Okay. So you haven't. Yeah. So I do have a draft that you recommend discussing. That's the final agreement would be reflected exactly what you said.
Thank you.
Sure.
I would just note that when we talk about the site plan consensus, it's the plan that we've all looked at, where it's a 2-phase plan, right? We're talking only about the private development area. That's the site plan takes, you got a fire station, that's where it's at. So we're not making any changes anywhere. But it's a 2-phase approach. First 2 buildings get constructed, then the next 2 buildings. So, and I know you all seen that. So I think there was part of the question that I was, doesn't have to be exact, but we have the consensus on that piece. And then, of course, as Scott said, the schedule. And it's always been the assumption that once we know what those true costs are and we come to real numbers, that would be, that's kind of the really true go, no go. But at any point during that time, those steps and stuff like that give us that option.
Can we have a copy of that in front of us before the next meeting, that they completed the draft, final draft of the development agreement?
Yes, and we, we've been working on it, but probably it's an item we'll need to go to executive session for. And that's the reason we, wanted to make sure we had this meeting and get out there. I think we make good points and we want to make sure we capture all of that. So that would be what the plan would be, to have an executive session at a future time to discuss some of the legal pieces that Scott's addresses.
This is Stites. I have a question regarding, so the start of phase 2, what's the time frame on that?
That would be, it would be market driven. So if the apartments and the retail component go as planned, I mean, we'd be ready and willing to start as soon as the city hall and the police department, I guess, move out of the way. And so that would be, I'd be looking for direction from you on that piece. But as far as we're concerned, I mean, we're anticipating, based on the market study, 18 to 22 units leased up during lease-up period per month. We should be there in 2 to 3 months. So, I mean, we're anticipating, if we go with this, we will be anticipating building the buildings and right away be ready to start phase 2 upon direction from the city.
And the start of phase 2 would also mean that we need to be prepared to build a new city hall, new police department, and a new fire station. Is that correct?
No, sir, that's, we would not need to do that. We have plans to, that we could relocate the police department, and it's anticipated that as far as the base city operations, we would be a tenant in one of these buildings. So the future of building new facilities is really a separate discussion, whenever that time may be. But it does not require us to build any new facilities.
Okay, I'm a little bit confused because I was thinking that that's what it meant when we had our meetings. I thought that we were talking about building a new facility, but maybe I've got that wrong.
Well, it's not required, but I mean, I know we've discussed new facilities. I think there is a time where those facilities, are warranted. But this project doesn't in and of itself require the city to build any new facilities in order for this operation to move forward.
Mike, I had a question about that. Does that mean that phase 2 would not require us to demolish the current city hall?
Right, that's what I was thinking.
It would require the demolition of the existing city hall facility in the tenant space. And again, the concept is that we, along with those tenants, if they wish to, would relocate into the commercial spaces that are being built as part of this project. So we would be a tenant within their building for a period of time, however long that wants to be. I mean, at some point, decide you want to build a new facility for all of those operations, then we would, that would be a separate discussion and decision. Whether you even built it on this site it doesn't necessarily require this site to be the location of the facility. I think those are down the road discussions, but obviously this building has to be demoed within the way, just as the other buildings were demoed. So phase 2 would require demolition and would require us to relocate city operations, which is a fairly small number of people at that point, into other space. And the intention of the agreement would be that we would be a tenant within the commercial space in one of the.
In phase 1.
Yes.
In phase 1.
Yes. We can't, I mean, there's got to be a place for the tenants. So part of the discussion is making sure that our current tenants have a place to go, because they want to maintain their retail space here in the Towne Center area. And so you got to have the building built before they could move. And likewise, we would stay where we were at until those buildings are done, and then we could relocate it to one of those building spaces for that. That's the concept as far as City Hall.
So how much would that cost for us to move everything, relocate, or buy new stuff to go lease from the developer, and then we'd be going from owning our building to leasing? So how much would it cost to lease every month? Like what are the expenses to the city for that?
I missed the last part of that. Well, as far as the lease rate, we don't have that determined at this, a determination of a lease rate yet.
Okay.
We can include that. I believe that's actually in the draft development agreement.
So are we discussing just phase 1, and then the developer, and sorry, it's just getting a little confusing, and the developer is interested in doing phase 1 even if we never do phase 2? Or are they combined?
No, we're interested in doing phase 1, even if we don't do phase 2. I mean, we feel like it's a stronger project if we do the entire phase 1 and phase 2, but we would be willing to just do phase 1.
And I had one other question really quick. Sorry to keep interrupting. On that engineering agreement, and you guys might be able to clarify if this is common practice or not, but since that is a private development section of the development in phase one, what would be the benefit of the city paying for that engineering fee and then say the developer chooses to not go ahead? I believe, Justin, you said, yeah, we could keep that engineering paperwork, but what good does that $175,000 paperwork do if the plan doesn't go forward?
Well, regardless of whether this plan goes forward or not, if you, based on the analysis that I've done, I've seen in talking to the engineer, the city is going to have to do something about stormwater management improvements in this area if you ever want to develop it in the future. And also you'll have to relocate the water line and sewer line. Pretty much all the relocation of the utilities and the planning for that and the stormwater management will have to be done at some point in the future if you ever want to develop this area.
Okay, so those pertain more to the site than the buildings.
Correct.
Thank you for clarifying that.
You got it.
Mayor, I think it might be valuable if Greg, maybe have Greg come speak a little bit. I mean, he does a lot of development projects in Wyandotte County, and they've done a number of work with different agencies around multifamily housing. So he may have some valid comments as to the market and process that might be useful. Maybe not, but we'll ask him anyway. So.
Mayor, council, staff, Greg Kendall, president of the Wyandotte Economic Development Council. I don't have a prepared presentation. Justin and I have not been working together on this. Most of our conversations have been with Michael and is observing the project as it goes forward. And primarily what I would tell you is that, I commend you all for looking at this as a public-private partnership. If you want to spur development in downtown Edwardsville, this is going to be your best way to move forward, whether it's with Dustin or someone else. But what he's telling you is accurate. That these kinds of pieces and parts that have to be relocated or improved, regardless of who ends up being a developer, are going to have to be done. And we've seen this when you're looking at nearby government or you're looking at the city of Lenexa, Lenexa City Center was structured very similar to this, right? They bought the land, they put a lot of that infrastructure in play. There's a lot of public-private partnership at play in that development as well. So regardless of proportionality to the size of the project, you're seeing these kinds of partnerships come together to move locations forward that the city deems as important to their long-term economic health. So I commend you for that. When I look at the rents for Michael, I looked at really primarily just Wyandotte County. That's really all I look at. So what you're looking at in terms of the rents, the program that Novograttic looked at, again, I would commend you all for using Novograttic. I think that was the right choice, and so I would recommend it as well. But the rents are very comparable with the Delaware Heights apartment complex. And those are some of the neighborhood of just a little over $750 a month, and they go up. Obviously, it depends on the size and square footage, but you're right in the sweet spot of where those rents are. The other notation I guess I would make is that we're looking at single-family sales, right? So there's less than 2 months of available supply in Wyandotte County. There's less than, I think, a month's supply of resale. So it's a good time to get into that market space. Between supply not really being there, so it's a good time to have a product on the market. And there are other projects looking at Wyandotte County, but they're going to be at that probably luxury level, right? So you're not going to be looking at folks that are looking for more of that middle America type of price range, right? So your average household income here in Edwardsville is a little over $65,000. If you were to try to go buy a house for that, you're going to be able to borrow about $200,000. You're not going to build houses for that, right? So if you want to grow your population, you need to probably go after that group of folks that I think this targets and provide them good quality housing stuff. So again, Michael, I don't have a presentation, but you want just my knee-jerk response to the presentation, like you all are saying. I think the biggest piece of this is if you all want to develop downtown like you do, then you're probably gonna have to take the bull by the horns and actually be more actively engaged in, is what I'm gonna probably suggest. Thank you.
Any questions or other
Yeah,
stuff?
are there any more questions in mind for where you want us to go?
Well, it's Dustin's presentation. I mean, I think where we're at is if there be consensus, simply on this concept of doing a two-phase project, right? The next step, so if that consensus around that, that would be a combination of residential and commercial projects, that we would continue to flesh out the development agreement that Scott's working on. We would flesh out the rest of the engineering agreement, which is pretty well done. And we can come back in 2 weeks with formal agreements for you to.
But the consensus will move us forward to get to that development agreement.
Yeah, I mean, if there's no interest in doing anything, I mean, we're kind of at the point of, you know, and we're engaging people in just to get those documents all prepared and ready to go. We don't want to use you know, time, Scott's time or engineer's time or Dustin's time if there's no interest in moving.
We don't need to put forward a motion or anything like that. We just need a consensus.
Yeah, okay, I would second that. I mean, I would just like to.
Does everybody on the internet hear that comment that we are looking for consensus?
Earlier, Councilman Adams mentioned wanting to see the development plan before going much further before the next meeting. I think that would be really beneficial so we know more about what retail we're looking at. Those were some questions that I had asked in previous meetings, was just what we would have as far as the retail. We don't want it to be, you know, payday loans and things like that coming into our downtown community. And so I'd feel a lot more comfortable seeing the development plan or what that relationship's going to be before I say, yeah, green light on a consensus personally.
I think that's exactly what we're saying, is we'll come back, you know, the concept is the consensus on concept is more about a residential commercial plan in 2 phases. And what we'll come back with in 2 weeks would be a detailed development agreement that will hopefully address those issues, along with the detail of the engineering contract, like we would enter into with, you know, when we enter into contract, say with BHC roads or something, we'll bring them back to you for your considerations. So both of those items would come back. So
Okay, as I understand it, we're not looking for consensus to move forward with anything other than to get to the development agreement.
yeah, are we ready to move to that next step?
You understand,
That's the
Carolyn, that's the purpose of this consensus, is to move forward on this development agreement? Because we don't have that yet, but that will be in, what did you say, 2 weeks?
Yes.
Okay. So in order for them to go ahead and develop all these, the development agreements, we need to get a consensus to move forward. But that doesn't bind us to anything other than just to move forward to get to that, the development agreement.
Right.
Okay.
I don't know if it needs a vote. I think it's.
Well, it does not need a vote, but, you know,
I think I'm hearing consensus.
Yeah.
I think for the next step.
yeah. I think that's correct. So we're going to instruct the developer to move to the next step, and for Scott Anderson and to finish out the development agreement, and we can get that in 2 weeks.
Okay. Would it be possible to have that for review before the meeting so that we have it in our hands a few days before?
Please, just understand, we're fine doing that, just understand that it will be a confidential document until we, you know, for purposes until we don't, you know, that you won't have legal counsel present to go through, but we can be prepared for it ahead of time.
I just don't want to delay it any further. I appreciate your efforts and working with us and being patient. And I think it's going to be a really good fun. I like the strategy of it and we can bite off bite-sized chunks and wait to see what the market does. There's definitely a demand. And I think the size of the project, my God, when you look at the projects going on around with thousands and thousands of apartments, who in the heck would want to live in an apartment? This would be a much more attractive environment. I think for a lot of people, we have a moderate size agreement or a complex instead of those monsters.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you for your time.
All right, the next item on the agenda.
I'm ready to talk.
Okay, go ahead.
Well, I don't know that we've determined that there's a consensus yet. I don't know how that is to be determined. And I'm not 100% sure that I am clear on where we're going with the whole city hall project. I'm not interested in being potentially painted into a corner where we're going to have to spend money down the road. I don't know I haven't heard where the police department's going. And I don't know where the city hall's going to go. And I will tell you, I'm not interested in below market rate apartments coming into our city. That's all I have to say. And I'm not on that consensus.
It's clear to me that the intent is for the city hall to move into one of the commercial parts of the buildings being built. That does not bind us to anything in the future at all about rebuilding and making a new city hall at all. I think the answer to your question about where the city hall, I think that's already been answered.
Well, it's news to me tonight that we would become a tenant in a building. I don't, and maybe that's my fault, but I have never heard that before. And I would like to hear more about this plan before.
Well, I'm sorry, I have heard that before.
What's that?
I said, I'm sorry, but I have heard that before.
Well, I don't know if you heard it. I haven't.
We'll address these issues. We'll address all these issues and be prepared in 2 weeks.
Okay. Thank you. Moving on to the next item on the agenda. Consider ordinance number 1038, section of city code related to removal of snow and ice and sidewalk.
I'm going to step up here, Mayor. Thank you. Okay, maybe that makes it easier for everybody to hear here. So tonight you have before you ordinance 1038, which would repeal in its entirety section 8.05, removal of snow and ice from sidewalks and code of ordinances. As you recall, this was brought up about a month ago. There was discussions about who is responsible for sidewalks for a number of reasons, but the first one was around snow and ice removal, especially if those sidewalks may be behind the home or somewhere other than, in front of the home. And after looking at it, doing some research, these ordinances are pretty typical. You probably find it in almost every city code. But I think, as I said then, and we'll say again now, they're seldom enforced. We reviewed our records. We have never had, at least that we could find in any recent time, any code case or a ticket or any other type of enforcement of removing snow from the sidewalk within 12 hours of a snowstorm. So it's really one of those ordinances that's there. It probably has good intentions. That is, you want people to take care of the sidewalk in front of their house so that people are walking down the sidewalk. But more times than not, 2 people do it, one does it. A couple other people might do it, somebody skips, and you still have the same difficulty. It's really worth the time and energy to send enforcement out there, code enforcement officer, law enforcement officer, somebody else to try to enforce this? And I think the answer generally is no. It generally becomes a neighbor to neighbor type of scenario. We certainly would continue to encourage people to clear their sidewalks in front of their homes for walking. You know, we take care of the sidewalks around City Hall, and places like that. We take care of our kind of thing. So I think really the intent here would be to remove this section of code and really focus. Hopefully, we don't have to have this discussion this year. Though I keep saying maybe one more snow event, but you know, use our social presence and other ways to encourage people to care for that. You know, I know some cities have a program where they have a group of volunteers that go and shovel snow, especially for elderly or persons with disabilities. They'll go make sure the walk is clear, the ramp's clear, things like that. So hopefully there's other ways to address that. So with that, I'd be happy to answer questions, but the recommendation is to adopt this ordinance and repeal that section of code.
I move to adopt ordinance 1038, repealing in its entirety Article 8.05, removal of snow and ice from sidewalks.
Second.
It has been moved and second to adopt ordinance number 1038, repealing section of city code related to removal of snow and ice from sidewalks. Are there any further questions? If not, would the clerk please call roll?
Adams,
Yes.
Cahar,
Yes.
Malat,
Yes.
Shriver,
Yes.
Stites.
Yes.
Next item on the agenda will be consider ordinance number 1039, amending sections of city code related to sidewalk maintenance.
From some of those same discussions, there was questions about really new sidewalks that are being built along some of our major streets that may be behind a home, or maybe it's a sidewalk or trail. So I'm going to use those somewhat interchangeably. That you have a large piece of property and it happens to run alongside the road, and you know, your house is 1,000 feet away from there, et cetera. Should you be the one responsible to maintain that? So in a typical scenario in neighborhoods, a developer pays to put in the sidewalk, and the long-term maintenance is the homeowner. So we're talking about a traditional neighborhood that site. So that's kind of what this type of ordinance or code ordinance is addressing. And the second thing it addresses is really that section was a group of neighbors don't have sidewalks, and they want to have sidewalks, but because the developer didn't put them in, they form some kind of a special benefit district, and everybody comes together and says, we're going to spend X number of dollars, we'll pay for it over 10 years. The city basically finances it through a special benefit district. The sidewalks get built, and then the homeowner maintain that. So that's really what this section of code was directed around. But again, what's happened is we built Kansas Avenue, as we've built. We'll be building 110th Street as we build 98th Street, things like that. Where we're putting in sidewalks, we're putting in trails. You know, should a homeowner or a single property owner be responsible for those types of roads? Or where we have roads where a developer is placed in, maybe sidewalks, and it could still be a residential use in that area, time it's built, maybe. So what we're proposing here is to add to this section where it talks about the maintenance of those sidewalks, to say that sidewalks and multi-purpose trails, so those things, multi-purpose trails, those 10-foot trails that go alongside roads, constructed with public funds. So this would be any time when we get federal funding or local funding, you know, it's paid for by the public, it's not paid for by a developer. And again, it's along the road. Along arterial collectors, those are our two major streets where we do these, so these are not in or any other street that may be determined by the city council. So, you know, I don't know what that scenario would be, but maybe we have a street that doesn't fall under being an arterial like it's a local street, but yet it serves a broader area, and we want to see the city council always have that. And in all those cases, those sidewalks and multi-purpose trails will be maintained by the city. So by maintaining, if something has to be replaced or fixed, or at some point it just ages out, they'll be replaced. Not unlike we do for curbs and gutters and streets and other projects. It would just be part of the public improvement plan. And annually, thankfully right now, we don't really have any sidewalks that are paved, but over time, we would set aside dollars to go repair those sidewalks to maintain or used by the public and safety. So that is our recommendation in ordinance 1039, which would amend Article 15.05, street sidewalks and public properties, with the language that I read to you, it's actually in section 15.05.04A. So that would be the only amendment to that section of the article. I'm happy to answer questions.
I move to adopt ordinance 1039, amending Article 15.05 pertaining to street sidewalks and other public property on the Code of Ordinances.
Second.
It has been moved and second to adopt ordinance number 1039, amending sections of the city code related to sidewalk maintenance. Would the clerk please call roll?
Adams.
Yes.
Cahar.
Yes.
Malat.
Yes.
Shriver.
Yes.
Stites.
Yes.
The next item on the agenda will be consider ordinance number 1040 related to community service sentencing in the Edwardsville Municipal Court.
Thank you, Mayor. Before you, we've got a couple of items specifically related to some court activity. First is ordinance or consideration of ordinance number 1040. This specifically relates to community service sentencing in the municipal court. As we pointed out previously, community service was not explicitly laid out in our code of ordinances as a sentencing option for the municipal court judge. This ordinance changes that. Essentially, that's really the only change to the ordinance language would be allowing the municipal court judge to sentence community service in addition to the penalties that he's already eligible to sentence. This is a point for the record, and just to clarify again, sentencing remains at the sole discretion of the municipal court judge. This just gives him another arrow in the quiver, as it were, as far as sentencing options. A little bit separate from this, but I'll just elaborate on it. It's detailed in the memo. This would essentially be the third part of our community service program within the city of Edwardsville. So if this ordinance were to be adopted tonight, it would give the judge the option to sentence community service. We continue to have and promote the voluntary community service program that we're continuing to do some peer research on and some peer comparison on to see if there's different ways we can strengthen participation in that. And then I expect before the end of the week, we've been in pretty close dialogue with the community service program out of the Metro that we discussed earlier. They've exchanged some information with us and given us all the necessary documents to essentially have Edwardsville listed as a community service site that their program would advertise to their clients if they meet a certain threshold of criteria to serve in Edwardsville. So this ordinance will give us that third kind of prong in the community service program that the city's moving forward with. So with that, I'll entertain questions on ordinance number 1040.
What type of sentences would the violator be subjected to? Like what kind of work, the community service work, what would they be expected to do?
So primarily, so what this does is kind of give the judge leeway in that area. Primarily, what this body has talked about is kind of right-of-way maintenance, litter pickup. We've also in the ordinance kind of made some allowances to where they could do some kind of charity work or volunteer work with a local nonprofit or community service group type activity. So that would be kind of worked out between the defendant and the municipal court judge, as well as the people who are actually administering the program. We will have some code enforcement folks involved as well.
What kind of a crime would warrant this selection to do community service rather than pay a fine? And who would supervise these people when they're doing their job?
As far as supervision goes, that would be on the community service officer or code enforcement officer. We did kind of a straw poll some communities among the city manager list, or specifically for communities under 10,000, about if they do run a municipal court or a municipal court public community service program, how is that administered? And the responses we got back were largely in line with kind of the bones of the program that we have in place right now, where the code enforcement officer would have supervision of that, and then they would essentially provide the affidavit to the municipal court judge that whatever was either sentenced or whatever was agreed upon in a voluntary program was done, and done to a satisfactory level. As far as what kind of crimes, the same kind of crimes that would be already out of our municipal court, that the municipal court judge has authority over. Specifically, we're not, as far as the voluntary program, we're not looking for, we're specifically looking for non-violent offenders for eligibility into that.
Would they have to be supervised at all times? Or you just gonna-
They would not need to be supervised at all times. That also counts in our communications with the NCSP program. They don't require constant supervision of the folks in that program. It's more of a verification that the work that they were assigned or volunteered for was done to satisfactory levels. Those being determined by city staff and the people who have oversight over the work being done.
What about liability? If they would get injured, they run over that car, cut their leg off with a weed eater or something, what's the liability aspect of that?
We prepared a waiver that they would have to sign, acknowledging that they're responsible for themselves and they are capable of undertaking what's being asked of them.
It is also in state statutes, there is a protection of liability for those sentenced to community service by statute. And our liability insurance would potentially treat it like any other liability claim. But there's specific protections to the city against claims being filed by an individual on community service statute. But let's just say they're out running the lawnmower, push mower, and they throw a rock out and somehow injure somebody, damages a vehicle, something. It would just be covered like any other insurance claim, whether it was our person behind the mower pushing the mower or a community service pushing the mower.
How many people do you think would take advantage of this rather than paying a fine?
To date, as far as voluntary programs go, we've only had 2 people who have reached out to staff. Only one person actually went through with actually having work scheduled. Since that time, we've been a little bit more proactive in making sure that program is, that people or the defendants who would be eligible are aware of it. Later part of 2020, we mostly focused on, the judge's discretion on recognizing those folks and recommending them to staff. Now we've got, more of a kind of forward-facing approach to that. We have pamphlets written up that are given to essentially every defendant that comes into the municipal court. We've got them, those same pamphlets and informational sheets at the municipal court office, so you can answer questions about that. But as far as participation at this point, we've only had the 2 interested and the 1 who moved forward.
Well, I think you answered that. You said that they are aware of this option.
They're certainly becoming, if they weren't aware before, we're certainly being much more forward with it going from this point on.
Most individuals that come to the court are going to have interactions with the court clerk, and most likely, relative to sentencing, they're most likely going to deal with the prosecutor first, right? So whether they're represented by an attorney or not, the prosecutor will make a recommendation. So if somebody comes in and they want to alter, they got a speeding ticket or something, wants some change done to it, and it can't be done at the court clerk level, but it goes to the prosecutor makes sentencing recommendations, et cetera, versus just going straight to the judge, just from a process standpoint.
Hey guys, I had just a couple of questions on that, and one is just touching on something that Councilman Malat mentioned, and that was the supervision. Even though it's not going to be addressed in the ordinance, we discussed as a council having the person who is assigned community service, having the supervising officer with them the entire time, and hopefully even helping in picking up trash or doing whatever they're doing, just being out there with them, working with them. And not only is that good for our community, but it's also good community relations with our police department, our codes officers, and our community, and some face-to-face time, and it looks good for our community. So was I mistaken there? I felt like everybody kind of felt like that should be standard practice.
I don't think there's any way we should take an officer off the street to supervise somebody mowing the right of way. Sorry about that.
Well, we're not going to have anybody mowing the right of way for community service anyway. But generally, I believe other departments are doing that, and I don't know that we have a police officer supervising it in the first place, is it, guys?
No, the program as it's structured right now doesn't have police oversight and supervision of it. Strictly speaking, it's the code, our what we call our community service officer, who does, among other things, code enforcement and health work.
I would just note, it's possible that, say we're doing a park cleanup project. They may get assigned to going with the parks people and working with them. So it's not one or the other. So, I think it could be at times when, we've assigned them a weed eater to go out and weed eat around fire hydrants, and, they're going to go do this many fire hydrants. We're going to continue to check up and make sure they're doing it. Where they may be, again, say the parks crew's out trimming up trees and we need an extra hand to help pick up the limbs and the brush and things like that nature. So I don't think it's a either or. It could be an either situation depending upon how many people we have at a time and what projects that we have to be done. It'd be more dictated by the work and by who we have available to. We may have a person, we may have a person that maybe they have a disability, but we could utilize them at City Hall to answer phones for 4 hours because somebody's going to be on vacation or something of that nature, and we're not going to put them out on the street crew trying to move asphalt. So I think it's, at least in my experience, it's kind of dictated by who do you have in the program and what are their basic skills and abilities.
But would you have that person at City Hall without supervision?
No, they would say work in the office, but I think the point is that they're not going to be necessarily watched the whole time. We may have them in the plans room going out and unrolling the plans and putting together a directory. We're not going to sit there necessarily with that person.
Do you know of any, sorry, Mike, do you know of any other programs that do not have constant supervision for court assigned public service?
As far as the municipal court work goes, in the outreach that we did, most of them are structured as ours is structured currently, where there is a individual, usually not out of the police department, usually it's in that building official code enforcement type activity, who's got that level of oversight and is doing the verification that the work is being done. So in the outreach that we've done, it would be atypical to have, it would be not very typical to have a constant supervision and constant police presence for, say, litter control or something like that. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just wondering what agencies that you contacted.
We put a email out to the Kansas Association of City Managers listserv. We spoke specifically with, I don't have the community name off the top of my head, I can get that to you, but specifically we polled communities that were under 10,000. We also asked KCK about the status of their community service program at a municipal court. They technically, and I'm having a meeting tomorrow to get some more details about this, do not run this program out of municipal court anymore. It's more out of the county side of the district court. And that again is largely driven by logistical complications, being that they don't have the staff to provide that kind of level of oversight, and it's better set up, at least from their perspective, running it out of the Metropolitan Community Service Program.
Well, I can tell you firsthand, KCK does have community service on a regular basis, and they are supervised by multiple police officers on almost every Saturday morning. Now, they're a bigger community than us, and I understand that. But if we have someone that their job is public spaces and codes enforcement, it seems like it would be appropriate for that individual to be working alongside, whether litter pickup, I think, was our #1 priority. I understand if there are other options there, but I don't see anything wrong with having that person spend 3 hours on a Saturday morning, maybe once a month, helping that process along, instead of dropping them off and checking them out 2 hours later or 4 hours later to sign a sheet.
I'm going to jump in here for just a brief moment. I think we need to caution about council directing the program. I think that should be left up to the staff. It is my understanding that that is out of our purview to direct staff to do such oversight. I think that's left up to them. Is that correct, Lisa?
It's a little difficult to answer that necessarily. It's what Zach is describing is not unusual at all. I can tell you in working in other municipal courts, the community service is ordered, they're handed a sheet with potential community service opportunities. They go out to that organization, typically in communicating with that organization, they assign a task. They have figured out you think it's worth this many hours. They verify it's being done. This is why you have non-violent offenders. They don't need to be supervised at all times because they're not the type of offenders that you would need to supervise. And so what we're describing is not atypical. And I think it would be difficult to direct constant supervision in a program that you're wanting to expand and in a program that's just beginning.
Well, my point is that the council does not necessarily have the authority to direct the staff on how to use personnel.
You're also getting into a judge's
Yes.
purview in municipal court prosecution.
Two more quick points, not to belabor it very much, but so right now, not to say that this conversation is not productive, but it's a little bit separate from the consideration and the possible adoption of ordinance 1040, which would explicitly give the judge the sentencing the opportunity to sentence. So that question and that ordinance is a little bit outside the conversation that we're having now. From a logistical standpoint, and I've been, because this program, as far as who is doing community service and when, we're never really going to have a very tight handle on that because it's just kind of defendant based and who is sentenced to it or who volunteers for it or who through the NCSP program is eligible to do that kind of work at Edwardsville. So it may be we've got 4 individuals who are doing litter control pickup along right away in Edwardsville, but there may be an all hands on deck project going on at the Public Works Department or on the police side. where priorities wouldn't necessarily align with the community service program at that exact time. So I don't want to say that, that kind of supervision and that kind of participation from the departments is never going to happen, but proactively assuring that happens every time in every single community service scenario, I don't think we can give you that assurance either.
One other question that I had on it, specifically on the ordinance, is they added private corporations organized not-for-profit or charitable or social service organizations performing services for the community. It seems like that could take the community service aspect outside of Edwardsville, and I didn't know if that was necessary to be a part of the ordinance, or if our goal was for the individual to be contributing in their community service hours in Edwardsville.
To the city manager's earlier point, this just kind of gives us a bigger tent as far as who we can assign community service. If there's certain physical limitations, or if there are geographical limitations that can't be overcome, then that would give the judge, they would still allow the judge this option to sentence it. Again, the actual nature of it is going to be in the purview of the municipal court judge.
I think this thing has gotten away from what we originally intended. I'm not sure why it's not more police department involvement in this, like other cities. They need to be supervised. Obviously, they are people that have committed crimes, whether traffic offenses, insurance, whatever it may be. They clearly need to be supervised to make sure they're doing the right thing. And I'm not saying that it has to be a police officer. I think it should be a police officer. You set the dates when you have community service, and even if they've been sentenced 2 months ago, okay, well, here's the date. I mean, you look out to the Saturday in June, and I don't think it's a big deal at all to flex someone's hours to cover that. For a short period, for a 3 or 4 hours in the morning on Saturday. So I just think that we're gotten away from what we originally set out to do here. Clearly not being bought into by administration like I thought it was going to be.
To your point about essentially the fail-safe against performance, the idea would be that if they don't perform their community service to the satisfaction of whoever's doing the oversight, then it does not count towards their sentence, and then they would incur whatever other penalties are involved in that sentence. That just to speak specifically to that point.
Would it be possible, and this might be a legal question, if the goal is to keep the community service in Edwardsville, if they are unable to perform their hours in Edwardsville, can't they just take the fine?
Yeah, community service is a privilege, not a right, so they don't have a right to community service, and if it's offered but they're not able to take advantage of it, that's not a legal concern.
Okay, I think in keeping with the original intent, I'd prefer just to amend that and take the extra verbiage out of it, just to ensure that we're keeping that community service hours here in Edwardsville. And I agree with Councilmember Stites that it should be supervised. I won't, obviously I can't assign who does that or how, but we are here to discuss policy, and I feel like the hours and the time and everything we've put into this potentially is wasted if there's not adequate supervision involved.
So this is Mike. I think one of the reasons for the nonprofits and charitables are, well, I'll just use you, Ms. Kahar. So when there's the food bank pickup thing, that would be an excellent opportunity to have somebody sentenced and do that kind of a function for if there's, a food drive going on, or maybe it's something related to the school, the elementary school, or I don't have an exact, here's what it is, but I think the purpose was, there may be opportunities to serve our community that are valuable outside of them doing it for the city. So, besides working for the city, they can have opportunities to work for the community in a community-based organization that's serving the intent is that they're serving our community. They're not necessarily working for, United Way in Kansas City, Missouri. That's not the purpose. They're doing a community service here, but it may not be a city-ran function. And that was the reasoning for the additional language to give the judge, or, if we have an organization, say Von Trent, they do a lot of service for our community. They may be technically based out of Bonner, but they serve here in our community. So if we had a candidate that could be valuable to them, serving our community, we wanted to at least have that as an option. Was thinking behind community service, so they could do, again, food banks or Von Trent, or maybe it's something with one of the nursing homes. I know right now that's not really an option, but there are community organizations, Habitat for Humanity, something like that. Maybe they're doing a project in town, so we want to give that as an option. That's the purpose for that language.
And again, the language in the ordinance is only specific to the community service that is sentenced by the judge. The voluntary program and the MCSP program would be, I think, more in the vein of what you're thinking. The voluntary program, the city wouldn't assign voluntary community service work for activity outside of the city. So that is essentially the focus, for lack of a better word, of the volunteer community service aspect of it. Additionally, with the MCSP program, what they're dealing with is more of the litter pickup and the kind of things that I think more what you're referencing.
Would it be possible just to tighten up that language to include within the Edwardsville city limits?
That I kind of lean on legal for that. I'm not exactly sure of the authority up to limit that.
You mean for the judge in,
For the ordinance.
for the ordinance? If you want to restrict it to City of Edwardsville, usually that's a sort of a court policy sort of decision. You might have a hierarchy of what you're going to first do, but I would think that, that would be something that you could do.
Really say for the community.
Well, I actually read city as only city government, city private, city organization. Yeah. I think it might be a construction issue in the ordinance. The way I read the ordinance in 3 was that city, community or public service work for city, that city was describing all of those next entities, a city governmental agency, city private corporation, city charitable or service organization.
So Lisa, would that mean that, say, a Von Trent is technically headquartered in Bonner Springs, but if they had a community service program for the city of Edwardsville, that's all within, would that fall within the purview?
I would think so if they're serving the city.
Yeah.
And so that was just the construction of the word.
Okay, when I read it, I thought it was reading city governmental agencies and then separately any private corporations, organized non-for-profit. So I'm thinking they could go to United Way or somewhere like that, or like Zach mentioned earlier, well, if they live further away doing community service in their own community, that's how I interpret it when I read that section.
I'll tell you what's typical in a lot of courts is that you have a list of agencies that the court will accept community service from. That is another way of doing this, and then you're listing those agencies that are in the city or serve the city, and those are what you will accept.
That probably wouldn't be codified into the code.
No, that would just be a policy decision by the court, that these are the ones that they will work with. And a lot of that is trial and error. Some don't do as good a job, they fall off. Some, do a great job and we use them more.
What's the pleasure of the council on this item?
I'm not sure what he just said. I couldn't hear it.
I'm asking for a motion in a second.
Before we move into it, would it be possible just to, like, it's not an exploding issue yet where we have to refer it all out. Can we just amend it to say community or public service work for city governmental agencies and just leave the rest out for now and then extend it if we need to later?
If someone were to make that motion and second it and vote on it, I think we could do that.
I'm so
Whatever
sorry.
was just said, we can't hear it.
If somebody were to, if a council member were to make a motion to Councilmember Cahart's point, essentially amending subsection 3 to read community or public service for city governmental agencies, period, that motion could be made and then voted.
Does the being supervised need to be changed?
I don't think that would be, that's more of a programming question and issue to continue to look at versus it's something that would need to be codified in the city code.
There again, I caution about the council getting involved in directing staff to do what to do with the personnel.
Well, I don't know how else you develop a program if you don't use personnel.
Well, if I could just summarize for us right now, I think we have this ordinance that would give the judge authority to send people to community service. At this point, he does not have the authority to send people to community service under our code of ordinances. And so it was a recommendation both from our council and from the League of Kansas Municipalities that if we wanted to have the judge have this authority, then we needed an ordinance that amended this section. And if the motion wants to include to recommend approval of ordinance 1040 with the amendment of striking from the word private through community, then that would be suffice to handle that part and get the ordinance adopted. That would be my recommendation.
Okay.
If those were stricken from the item number 3, that would eliminate any of the churches from participating in the plan. And so I would not be in favor of that. I think we should open it up to public entities and not-for-profits like churches that could certainly use some help. I make a motion, we adopt ordinance number 1040 as written. Second.
There's been a motion and a second to adopt ordinance number 1040 as written. If there are no further questions, would the clerk please call roll?
Adams?
Yes.
Kamar?
No.
Malott? Yes. Shriver?
No.
Stein?
No.
So we have the ordinance change. Thank you, folks, for all
I
the
would
work that you did for nothing. You spent
Well-
half your digging into the weeds over nothing. Thank you.
Nobody can hear, nobody can,
Wait a minute, I'm in control of this meeting. We were.
well, nobody can hear you. We can't.
We're moving on to the next item on the agenda.
Well, I would like to know what was said. I couldn't hear what was being said. I'm sorry.
The vote has been made.
Yes, sir. Next item,
It has been-
yeah.
So I guess we don't get to be privy to what was said. Is that correct? We don't need to know what was said.
Mayor McHenry essentially just gave the staff direction to move on to the next item, being that the motion
So
failed to
the
pass.
council that can't hear doesn't get to be privy to the information in the open meeting. Is that correct?
I apologize if you cannot hear, but the council, you heard enough to vote. The vote was not approved, so we are moving on to the next item on the agenda to appoint Dave Guckers as a permanent pro temp.
Mr. Mayor, this item kind of stemmed from the last court date where, due to unforeseen circumstances, the judge was unable to make it to the docket. Typically, whenever we do need to have a pro temp judge appointed, our municipal court judge, Judge Wetzler, will do that appointing and seek somebody out himself. That process doesn't really require any council oversight. It's essentially a function of the municipal court judge as appointed by the mayor and reviewed and approved by council. Our code does stipulate, though, if we were to have, I know the language is a little hinky, permanent temporary judge. It's essentially keeping a judge on retainer. So it relieves the burden from our current municipal court judge to having to go out and find people if for whatever reason he can't make it. This would essentially name Dave Guckers, who has served as the city attorney here for a number of years, as well as some other posts that are positions that are detailed in the agenda memo. The recommendation from staff would be to have Dave Guckers appointed as essentially our permanent judge pro temp in the absence of our regular appointed municipal court judge.
Mr. Mayor, I make a motion to approve the appointment of Dave Guckers as the permanent judge pro tempore. Second. Did everybody hear that?
There has been a motion and a second to approve the appointment of Dave Guckers as the permanent judge pro temp. Are there any questions?
Is there any financial expense that would change?
No, the contracted fees for the municipal court judge essentially remain the same, and it's essentially a separate contract with, that we would have with Mr. Guckers. Previously, when we've done it, he has honored the current contract agreement for the current hourly rate, I should say, for the, our standing municipal court judge. So from a cost perspective, it's just 6 one way, half a dozen another. Either we're paying Judge Guckers or we're paying Judge Wetzler.
Thank you.
If there are no further questions, would the clerk please call roll?
Adams?
Yes.
Kmart?
Yes.
Malott?
Yes.
Shriver?
Yes.
Stipes?
Sorry.
I didn't hear you if you voted, Councilmember.
Oh, I'm sorry if you didn't hear. Yes.
Thank you very much. Okay, next item on the agenda will be the city manager's report.
Yes, Mayor, you have before you our written report this evening. I would add, let me get the microphone here, sorry. So you have the city manager's report this evening, the printed report. I would note under administration on the Riverview Crossroads project, we had a utility coordination meeting this morning. We have some utilities that were to have got their utilities out of the way that have not done so. And so that will delay the start of the project, which means it will delay the maybe a good thing, delay the closing of the road. We don't want the road closed until we know the contractor can get in there and perform work on a steady basis. So we don't have a time to start. We're trying to work with the utilities to get those utilities out of the way that should have already been out of the way. So other than that, I don't know that I have anything else to add. Be happy to answer any questions. That's it for this evening, Mayor. Oh, I do have one thing. I am sorry. If you don't get the lead news, and I don't know who does, there is one bill that's been going through the legislature this year that will change how property tax and the budget process is handled. So in summary, they're going to do away with the tax lid. So the tax lid has been in place for a number of years that has not been effective. I think most people would agree. And in lieu of that, there'll be basically what they'll set as a kind of base tax rate. Different states call it something else, but basically it'll say based on last year's mill levy plus this year's value, here's kind of the floor tax levy. So here's zero, and then you have to do certain reporting if you go above that point. There's there'll be rules around it. We don't have all of those, but I think generally there's pretty strong support that this method will be a better method for reporting purposes on mill levies and impacts of mill levies than the tax lid was doing, which created probably more work than it in the end that really created kind of that truth of taxation and tax transparency. So you may hear about that, Senate Bill 13. I believe it started in the House and then went to the Senate and back to the House, I think, to finalize it. And expect that it's a bill that will pass, and probably one that has been presented thus far. So other than that, the league is having its annual leadership conference that will come up in Lawrence in June 18, 19. The mayor may be able to speak to whether that's in person or not. I think it's going to be in person, but I'm not.
Currently, the plans are in person.
Okay. So that is all I have, Mayor. I'll have to answer any, I believe Chief Mathies has an item.
Thank you. Just as a part of the year-end presentation.
Chief, if you don't mind.
How's that, better? Thank you. Late today, I did receive from the district attorney's office some data we didn't have for the year-end presentation, and we submitted 74 cases. There's multiple charges and multiple suspects related to that number of cases. Only 5 of those were declined, and 3 were later dismissed. And currently, there are still 25 pending formal charges. So we've submitted the cases to the district attorney, and they're still under review, and we expect better than 99% of those to be have formal charges and move forward. So pretty good year. Once again, another good year with the district attorney. It's a good relationship. We like what they're doing for us, and they keep working hard. So just wanted to mention that.
Chief Mathies, this is Stites. Whatever it is that you've done at the microphone, however you spoke or where, that came in crystal clear. I mean, it was the best anything has sounded all night. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to move into the council comments, and we'll start with Councilman Evans.
Couple things. One is Chief Mathies, you can get up and get the microphone again. It said that the police calls were for service decreased by 18%.
Yeah,
Is there a thought of why?
COVID, specifically COVID. We're talking about our dispatch calls for service. Is this still going here?
Yep.
Dispatch calls for service were down that much for an entire 3 months. We went from averaging about 650 calls, that's historic, in the sense of all the years, that's about what it averages a month, to 248.
numbers that we just never seen before. And so it was literally a shutdown. And then, as we all did, everybody got cabin fever and it warmed up, and then it was full out. We had a very busy year after those COVID months. So if you look at those 3 months compared to 5-year history, it was the lowest in its history ever. So we really went to a full stop. And again, our COVID protocol was to do a number of things by telephone. We didn't enter buildings, we didn't go into high rises and do those kinds of things. But at the same time, for a while, we didn't have the activity levels from the 911 center. We just didn't have them. And then again, the timing of the year, cabin fever, people were stuck, and then suddenly the floodgates opened. And that's how our year went. So, but as we did point out, we only had a couple of cases internally with the police department for COVID. So we were being very strict. But in talking with the other agencies, specifically Rock Springs, they experienced that a pretty good drop. And so,
Another question about, again, a social media post that they showed Bear with some new body armor.
new body armor.
And I can't remember if it said who donated it.
Well, you stumped me at this point because I don't remember the name myself. It's just as soon as you were saying that.
Individual?
It was, no, I believe it was a company or a group that puts that kind of thing together. And they solicit folks who don't have those for their canine units, and they make a generous donation and get the product shipped to us. And that just arrived within the last 6 to 5 days. So,
Great.
and I'll get you that name, and I'll certainly put that.
Great, thank you.
Okay, next will be Carolyn.
Okay, a couple of things. One is we have our Harvesters event coming up, or Edwardsville Mobile Pantry food distribution coming up this Saturday. So I just wanted to mention that to everybody, that would be going on at the community center. And then it is a pre-registration required event, and that deadline is this Wednesday, the day after tomorrow. So if you know of anyone that is in need, that would be a good opportunity for them to get some groceries. I won't take too long. I put some thoughts together on COVID in the area as we approach the 1-year anniversary of our county giving legal power to the health officer to mask and isolate our communities. I thought it would be a good time to remind our community and community leaders why these mandates were allowed to begin with. We were told the health orders were in place to flatten the curve and keep our hospitals from being overrun. New updates, according to the Wyandotte County COVID Hub, for weeks we have been at less than 11% positive test rates, which is great. The state average for February was less than 5% and is running even lower, close to 3% now. This means for every 100 people tested, at least 95 Kansans are being informed they do not have COVID. So great news. According to the Kansas Department of Health and Environment, as of yesterday, of our 708 ICU beds in Kansas, only 39 are being used for COVID patients. Of the 795 ventilators, 17 are being used for COVID patients. In Wyandotte County, we only have 23 patients hospitalized with COVID, and not all of those are necessarily Wyandotte County residents. I think we can all agree that we have surpassed by far the goal of flattening the curve and giving hospitals relief. The Wyandotte County health official must be convinced that Edwardsville is far better off than KCK, as they put our seniors on the back burner, as they've gave vaccination priority to seniors in KCK, yet they still insist on keeping us under the same extreme orders of Kansas City, Kansas, even requiring adults at outdoor soccer events to wear masks while watching their children, even if they're 30 feet from the next person. But if they were in a restaurant, there would be no mask required. The mandates and shutdowns have served their purpose. It is time to consider the climbing rates of domestic abuse, drug and alcohol abuse, and suicide. And it's time to give Kansans and the people of Edwardsville back their freedom. I trust our people to be informed of their personal health and that of their family, church, or business, and to live their life accordingly. the people still would have the freedom to choose to wear masks or 2 masks, choose to attend schools from home, or require masks in their personal businesses would be absolutely fine. But we are passing the point where we can keep excusing government imposed mandates. I think it's important that as we have those conversations with our county and state representatives, that we are pushing to continue lowering mandates and start implementing recommendations for our community. That is all I have for tonight. Oh, I did want to mention really quick, and this will be super brief, on the community service ordinance. I was fine with passing it with that amendment, just keeping it for its intention, original intention, and keeping that right here in our community and our city to help lower some of the stress on our employees and helping our roadways. So maybe we can bring that up at a later date, since we have talked about it for quite a bit. I think most of us are on the same page there. Thanks, guys, for your time.
Thank you. Malott?
Mike, moving utilities on 4th Street south of the track, is that in relation to the 4th Street improvements? Correct. Yeah, I think the power company is moving their power lines. So that pretty much on target for that? I think it's supposed to go out to bid later this month. We have all the properties acquired except for the one. That case has been filed in district court. And I mean, it's been filed. There's not been a hearing set yet. There was some further conversations with the property owners' legal representation. So we're hoping maybe we can find a solution before it actually goes to the, I mean, it's filed in court now, but they haven't had the initial hearing yet. Is that the same thing on 110th Street up north where they're moving that project up there, the Crossroads project? Yes. So they're mainly, the way it was supposed to go was the electric utility was supposed to get a pole set, and the gas company could set their gas line, which runs right behind the poles. Somewhere along the way, the gas company individual retired and nobody picked it up. And I can't tell you why the power company, but we'll just say it's not as clean as it should be. Dusty and I spent 2 hours on the phone with various representatives today, and I imagine I will spend at least that amount of time tomorrow again talking utilities. And then I've had some, also on kind of the same subject, I've had some concerns from residents up there about Bonner's proposed project on the west side. Do we need to have some discussions with Bonner Springs, maybe some agreements that need to be made or so forth? The proposed project that they're putting across the highway. Well, and I don't have all the information. So right now, the planning commission approved the preliminary plat and final plat. It was, I think, initially scheduled to go to the council this evening, but I don't believe that occurred. I heard that there was issues from Bonner staff that had to be addressed. And then the next point after that would have to be site plan, that we call a development plan, that shows the landscaping and all that kind of information. And we really don't have much to discuss. The last I've heard, there is not a specific project at this point. So it was speculative was the only project I've heard thus far was a speculative project. So there's still some outlying issues on some easements and rights of ways and things of that nature. So right now I don't want to say it's not a process because I'm not engaged in their discussion, but there's not specific. I do think their staff was fully aware of some of our concerns. Well, I'm concerned with probably more with the water runoff, on which direction it's going to go. They're going to be draining a lot of. We had the same kind of an issue when they built the racetrack. Right. And then And we ended up getting probably 75–80% of the runoff of that racetrack. And I'm gonna say it by my house, basically.
Right.
It's a floodplain anyway. And I think there needs to be quite a bit of research and communications with Bar Springs on that concern. So I just wanted to bring that up.
Yeah, we have had discussions about the drainage and the, that they will, get different things. So there is not a grading plan on the plat. They give kind of an estimated grading plan, kind of showing current and future, but there's not a grading and stormwater plan that's been prepared yet that I've seen. But I think they're aware of some of our concerns.
Okay, and I just want to make sure that you were aware of it, and I know you're always on top of it, but we're not going to appreciate that. And that's all for me, thank you.
Margaret, you're next.
Yes, I just have a few things to talk about or ask. First one, Zach or Mayor or Mike, is there any thoughts going into maybe going back to our May citywide cleanup? Due to, thank you, Carolyn, for those numbers. I read a lot about the COVID, read a lot about everything, but those numbers are very exciting. I think we're all going in the right direction. That being said, I know we have several weeks, couple of months, but is that a possibility, or are we going to go with something in the fall?
Actually, both. We're currently planning on holding the citywide cleanup as it's been held in the past. It's a matter of, Casey Disposal's been notified of typically how many dumpsters we get, and that could, that could raise or lower a little bit. Typically, we get between 7 and 11 dumpsters. But right now, the plan is 100% to hold that event in May, on the May date that we usually do. It's just a matter of making sure that at that time, if public restrictions are in place or not, to allow us or disallow us from doing that. In addition to that, included in the current contract with Casey Disposal is a separate curbside bulky item pickup that would happen in the fall around that November date. I think that first weekend in November is when we would try and keep it. So the way we structured the solid waste contract we have with Casey Disposal is that both of those services would be provided.
Wonderful, wonderful. So if and when the May citywide cleanup happens, maybe some information can go to everybody, letting them know that the fall event will still happen just as well. Something probably you put in the utility bills, just so they know that will be coming down the line, because I know there are several residents maybe have a big bulky item and they can't get them to the citywide cleanup. All the thousands of mattresses that come down there.
Right. No, I'm sure I'm sure there's double the amount of stuff that we didn't have the traditional event last year. But yes, we'll make sure that we're going to use all the resources that we typically do to make sure people are aware of that May date as we get a little bit closer to it. I don't want to overpromise at this point and have the rug pulled out from under us, which happened more than once in 2020. But at this point, we are completely planning on having that event on the third Saturday in May.
Perfect. And it'll rain, but that's okay.
Yeah.
So do we have any updates on the sign or signs for the city?
I do not have an update on there. I spoke to them. I thought they were going to get out and mark utilities so we could get that 10th sign put up. And I apologize. I need to follow back up with the folks at Young Sons. I will do that tomorrow.
Okay, perfect. And next week's daylight savings, I guess I'll take this from Chief Whittam. Change your batteries in your smoke detectors. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. You're next, Jeff.
Yeah, Zach, I was gonna ask if maybe between now and our next council meeting, if we might be able to work on or maybe figure out and see if it's just on my end or not, but I don't think it is. the difficulties in hearing. And maybe it's when people are talking through their mask, I'm not sure. But sometimes it was coming in really clear, and others that you couldn't hear, you couldn't hardly hear at all. So between now and the next meeting, maybe we can work on that, and that's all.
Yes, sir. Luckily, we are recording this meeting, so we'll be able to kind of listen back and isolate some of the spots that had more audio difficulties than the others. I think you're probably right in the sense that it's mostly just kind of retraining us into addressing the microphone and speaking in a different way more than anything else. But we're definitely going to be continuing to work on this new technology that we've got.
Okay, thank you. I really have nothing more to add to other than we are adjourned.